Hey, what's going on, everyone? Nick and Shane here to talk about the Halo TV series episode 1. There will be spoilers in case you haven't seen it just yet, but let's venture on and talk about our overall thoughts and impressions for this first episode. Shane, how are you doing on this Saturday afternoon?
I'm good. It's a warm day here in Texas. We're finally getting out of winter and it's been pretty nice. How about you?
Yeah, it's pretty kind of a bit of a cloudy day here, but mid 70s here in Florida, so can't complain, and
Yeah.
should be a pretty nice weekend overall. So I enjoy it. Yeah. So
Let's talk about Halo.
yeah, let's. So
So much to talk about.
yeah, there actually is. So we'll try and go through this steadily. Um, I, I guess I'll say in terms of our backgrounds, try to summarize it real quick. I've been a long time fan, and I mentioned this in the like solo video I did about a interesting article that's been floating around the internet for some
Yeah.
time now. But I've been a long time Halo fan. I've read quite a few books. From the early 2000s. I've played all the games. I've competed. Uh, you know, uh, in Halo tournaments, both in LAN and online. Um, LAN parties for days and years when we were younger. I've got a nice little uh, Master Chief and Halo original artwork that I got from MegaCon like back in 2017. So yeah, I love it. You and I both play Halo Infinite,
Yeah.
and so there's a lot of I've invested a lot of time into this IP, and I think at first once this was announced, I was pretty hyped about it. Like, and I
Was
understand
it
there's
10
some.
years ago or something by
Yeah,
now?
going back to when Neil Blomkamp was
Yeah.
slated
Yeah.
to do this, that was one of the things I was most hyped about because
Yep.
of what he did with District 9, which is a great film. And I think a lot of people wanted to see him do that. There was a short that's still online that you can. It's like maybe 8 to 10 minutes long, but you can see this like concoction that he created
Yep. I
about it. And
remember
even at that time, like it was pretty cool. And we wanted to see more of it, but we didn't up until now in 2022. And I think from what I was reading, they started to kind of gather everything for the series in 2019, and finally releasing it. And we get the trailer, from a couple months ago. And, I know people were sort of on different side of the fences with this, but it's here now. And it still seems that people are on both sides of the fence with this. So,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit more about your background and stuff like that?
Yeah. So I got my first Xbox right after Halo 2 came out. Um, and so my parents like wouldn't let me play the first one because it was rated M and everything like that.
Yeah.
And so got it after Halo 2, played through the first one, and then I didn't start playing online until the 360 came out. And then
Okay.
like I've been playing Halo, like Halo 3, I put so much time into that. Halo 5 too. But both of those, I played so much multiplayer, like got top ranks and everything. Like
Yeah.
it was unhealthy how much I played those games.
Yeah.
But
I definitely missed some college classes for
yeah,
Halo 2 and 3. So,
yep,
whoopsie daisy.
yep.
Ranks.
Trying to grind to level 50 in Team
Yeah.
Slayer, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've been playing this franchise forever. It's definitely got a special place in my heart, and so it's good to see something come out finally because it's been rumored for so long that we would get
Yeah.
a live action Halo, and there's a lot of cool stuff to focus on for a story. And yeah, so I think in terms of overall impressions for the show, it's actually a little better than I thought it was going to be. Um, I know going into this, and you referenced that Variety article, a lot of
Yep.
people wanted to hate it,
Yeah.
and I do think there's issues with it. Like, it feels kind of low budget at times. The action is a little bit wonky,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of cheese
Yeah. There
in
is.
this. But I think if you kind of approach it as like a sci-fi channel type of show, but with Halo characters, it's actually better than I thought it would be. What did you think?
Yeah. In in contrast with the article that circulated, when after I watched it, during watching this first episode, I'm thinking to myself, there's no way this can be accurate because of the things that were included in this episode. Now, granted, there are things that are different. There are things that they changed, and they stated that they're going to do it their way.
Yep.
They're taking their own shot at this, um, while I guess still trying to pay somewhat of an homage to the original canon, which we do see. I referenced saying like, how can you do this without acknowledging the Fall of Reach book that precedes Halo Combat Evolved? And then in the episode, they go to Reach, and I'm like, wait a second,
Yeah.
you
It
can't.
seems like the Fall of
What?
Reach is going to happen in the
Yeah,
show.
exactly. Yeah, it seems like it has to come to a certain episode in this first season, and that's a big part of the book and what really sort of sets up Halo Combat Evolved because of spoiler alert, but of Reach getting glassed by the Covenant.
Yep.
They're forced to leave on the Pillar of Autumn, which Cortana jumps them into slip space to the Halo ring,
Yep.
and that's the big part of the series, obviously. And so again, I'm watching this first episode and going, wait, they had to have known something from the books and something from the first game, and they've included a few things in this first episode that take place after Halo 1, like High Charity,
Yep.
for the Covenant. That we don't see that until Halo 2.
Yep.
So I'm like, okay, they know more than what was led on to be. So, to I'll share this tweet that you shared with me
Yep.
a little bit later, but it seems that I think there's this bit of a misleading, dare I say, misinformation, or maybe just like there needed to be some sort of clarity and context to what was originally stated.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like that quote saying we didn't pay attention to the games at all was specific to their trip to 343 Industries.
Right.
And the people who made the show saying like we did start with the games, obviously, like we're not going to ignore the games entirely. However, when we went to 343 and we only had an X amount of time to talk about things before making it,
Right.
we focused on the lore and the world building, which makes sense to me. Like 343 knows where they're going in the future story, and they know
Yep.
kind of what's important to them and the franchise moving forward. You don't need to go to 343 and ask them about the games. You can just play the games, right?
Right. Right.
Like, and so it definitely seems like they have an appreciation for the games. Like they've got all of the sound effects and weapons and everything like that in here. A lot of the characters are in here.
Yep.
Obviously, they've changed appearances and casting choices for them, and that's totally fine by me. They have like the first person view, which is obviously like a direct like hi, right to the
Games.
game fans.
Yeah.
There's a scene where he's hiding behind cover waiting for his shield to recharge. It's like there's
Yeah.
no way you would have put all these moments in if you ignore the games entirely. So I
Yeah,
think
for
people
sure.
just got a little bit in a fit because they read that article. However, I have seen a lot of people that are upset about changing the story. And I think this is an interesting discussion because game narratives, like adapting a game to a show, is hard, right? And this is why so
It
many
is.
of them fail because game narratives are structurally different than other mediums. So, like, if you read a book, it's very easy to translate that to screen because most of the time your perspective is, focused on some, fleshed out character and like you're watching or you're observing a character through their life or through their experiences, right? In a game, it's a little different. And some games are like that. Like I think The Last of Us is actually going to be very good because that's a very story focused game. Something like Halo, though, Halo 1, the Master Chief's personality and character development is zero. Like there is no Master Chief is not a character in Halo 1. He is a stand-in for the person playing the game. And so in
Essentially.
most game stories, the main character is very, very hollow and not fleshed out a lot because you are the main character. Anybody playing the game is the main character.
Yeah.
And so when you were to approach a Halo game, or Halo show or movie, how do you make Master Chief interesting, right? You have to create a character for him, because even the characterization that we get in the later Halo games is still very minimal. He's very quiet, doesn't say a lot, but that's a very boring main character, right? If you were to make him the focus of a show. So you could have gone that. So there were basically two ways you could have done it. You could have kept Master Chief as the main character who was, didn't say much and was mysterious, or keep him as a character but not the main character. And that's what they did in that web series, Forward Unto Dawn. Did you ever see
Yep.
that?
Yep.
Master Chief was like a cameo. He wasn't the main character. It focused on
Yeah.
all these Marines, and then Master Chief came in, and that works. I think it worked very well because it keeps that, dominant presence of him.
Yep.
But if you want to focus on Master Chief, you have to make him a character. And so that's why I kind of appreciate it. Like, they had him take his helmet off. They showed who he is. They showed, what his motivations are. He's conflicted between his duties, and he's conflicted between doing the right thing. And I think that's interesting, right? It's more interesting than making him exactly what he would be in the game.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
I think with the there are some similarities with what they displayed in this first episode, which I imagine we'll see throughout the season, uh, compared to the games, and some of the differences. Like, I enjoyed the mystery. I always enjoyed the mystery behind not seeing Master Chief's face
Yeah.
throughout the games, because in some cases it's sort of like a, to me, like a bit of a Darth Vader-y aspect.
Yep.
Which I think they, again, nothing to take away from Pablo Schreiber, because I do like him as an actor. I mentioned this before. I've liked him since The Wire,
Yeah.
and so, and again, I thought he fits. He's a tall guy. Chief is, over 7 feet tall in the armor, so you got to have someone that's big enough to sort of carry that stature. And I know it's going to be hard to find someone that big, who is an actor.
Because he's what, 6'10" in
Out of the
canon?
armor. Yeah. So, like, how many people are 6'10"? Like,
Yeah.
majority of the well-known actors or people who can act well are going to be in that mid 6 foot range, which is fine. But it's almost like I wondered too, could they just had him sort of like the I guess the opposite of Mando, right? Where you got Pedro who voices Mando, and then obviously when it comes to the scenes with him that has, without the helmet on,
Yeah.
he'll portray that, but most of the time he's just doing the voiceover work. So it's like, I've seen a lot of people say, like, it's not Steve Downes, because obviously how iconic Steve Downes is.
Right.
And I guess the way I could equate that is to, like, having James Earl Jones portray Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And I get, like you're saying, like, I get it, where you can't always have it that way.
Yeah, I think they could have done it. Like, they could have had Steve Downes be the, helmet voice. But then, like,
It wouldn't
is
match.
is his voice, like, supposed to be like Darth Vader, where it, like, changes his voice in the helmet? I don't think it's supposed to be, right?
It's not
Like,
supposed to, and that's the
voice.
thing. If they would have taken off if, like, let's say they waited until, like, the 8th or 9th episode in the season, and it's been Steve Downes this entire time, and
Right,
then
you
they
get the
take off
Kylo
the
Ren
helmet.
effect. Right?
Exactly. I
So
was
it's like, "Oh,
just
this
about
guy
to
is
say.
not."
And then you get the Kylo Ren effect, and that
Yeah.
reminded me of it when I watched it the second time. I'm like, man, like, it would really feel very similar to the whole Kylo Ren situation,
Yeah.
with the helmet on, helmet off. And I tried to really listen to the differences when I watched this episode the second time, and I, again, I could put a strike against the show for taking his helmet off, and in some cases, I get the concept of trying to make Master Chief more personable.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of what was portrayed in the games is a bit of a mix between the writing and the dialogue and the tone, like the reflection of Steve Downes' tone.
Yep.
But to further your point, which I agree with, in the games, you're playing as Master Chief from the from the first person perspective, so you're driving the story. But a majority of the dialogue is circled around Cortana. She's
Yep.
the one that talks to you. Goes, Chief, heads up, like
Yep.
Chief, do this. Chief,
Yep.
I'm gonna do this. Like Cortana, and that's once we finally see Cortana, that's where I think a lot of my critique will come in because of how much of an impactful character she is.
Yep.
She is more so the main character than Chief,
Yeah, it's
you
a good
know,
point. It's
um,
a really good
because
point.
in the book, uh, Cortana picks Chief. It's
Yep.
not, Chief picks Cortana, or House is like, no, I don't care, Cortana. I'm putting you with John, and that's
Right.
that. Like,
Yep.
Cortana was sophisticated enough to look at, John's his entire story basically, and then
Yeah, and I
go,
hope they keep that.
I do too. Like I really want them to say it's based on the luck that he's had, because I mean there's a
Yep.
lot that we didn't see through John's Master Chief's growing up, the whole process of what he went through. I mean,
And
look,
maybe we'll get that. Like,
we
when he
could,
touches that thing, there's, like, a little backstory thing,
yeah,
and we can talk about, like, the plot shortly, but,
yeah,
like, what's actually going on shortly,
right,
but
right. Yeah, the backstory from that the vision he had, like so I from I do know that he did have like a vision, um uh but it wasn't from like an object. I would want to say it was from like cryo, like slip space and cryo chamber activity,
oh, yeah,
from like from the canon. But
yeah,
I appreciate the fact that they did touch on that happening in general. Like, hey, you did have a family. Hey, you did, have a childhood. And from the book, he had brown hair, blue eyes, and freckles,
yep,
and a gap in his teeth when he was a
yep,
kid before he was, inducted into the Spartan program.
yep.
Which, you know, I, I I appreciate, I guess, the more adult look of him, which kind of fits the whole I have a shaved head because I'm a soldier aspect. Um, but I'm kind of curious to see if they'll play more upon his backstory, like if we'll see
I hope
more
they do.
flashbacks to him being a kid, like going through the Spartan program, because
Yeah,
I would appreciate that, and I think a lot of people would,
I think
because
it'd be really cool if they did a full episode of that.
yeah,
Just like
yeah,
a bottle episode of just his backstory, that'd be super cool.
yeah, like because there's a lot that really comes from. I mean, that's I remember reading that that was something that even Bungie themselves were a little hesitant on, by not wanting to give Chief a backstory. And then Eric Nyland was talking with him about, like, I guess, the importance of having a backstory, and then they agreed to it. And again, I think that's one of the reasons why The Fall of Reach was such a great book, in my
Yep.
opinion. And it's sold like over 1 million
Yeah,
copies, so it
yeah, I've
wasn't
read it.
like this.
It's the only Halo book I've read.
It's the best one in my
Yeah,
opinion. Yeah.
yeah,
Like, so, I mean, I think that's something that anyone wants to read. I definitely would recommend that book. But
mhm.
talking a little bit more about the object that he finds and touches, which again is different than what comes from the canon. Like, uh, and I'll quickly interject this, like where we see the story, come off, like, um, the war between the Covenant and humankind,
Yeah,
has been
let's talk about, like,
persisting for a while, right?
yeah, let's talk about what we saw in this episode, right?
Yeah.
So, like, we start out in this, I guess the major canon change is there's, like, a rebellion,
Yeah, there's
against the UNSC at some point.
which which I will say, is mentioned, uh, in, uh, I forget what book it is, but they're so Master Chief John actually goes to fight some insurgents,
Oh, interesting.
earlier in his military career.
Okay.
Um, and
And
it's
that's clearly touched on here.
it's based on his home, like, system. I
Okay.
don't think Madripoor is
Yeah, that's probably new.
it's that is a I think it's a new made up planet.
Yeah.
But actually it reminds me of Madripoor from like Marvel.
I just couldn't stop hearing Madrigal, like the
Magic, yeah.
Encanto family.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
I just kept hearing the Encanto music.
Madrigal,
Yeah,
Madripoor, like what?
Madrigal.
Um, but yeah, like so it was interesting to include that, and personally I don't like making it seem like the UNSC are the bad guys, because like the whole reason why Keyes references it, like you know, Master Chief and the Spartans are their number one military asset, and they were
Yep,
created to fight against the Covenant.
yep,
Um, so there is an importance around them, and I think I think with we'll probably get a little bit more about again, hopefully the backstory in flashbacks and seeing why Halsey implemented this Spartan 2 program because the Covenant were just too overpowered
yep,
compared to what the UNSC had. And I think one of the other cool things about Reach was like Reach is, for those of you that don't know, Reach is you know another version of Earth, but like Earth's home, but Reach is also like the more sophisticated version of Earth. Where that's obviously that's where all the research is. That's where all like the military power is, and it's been well hidden, from the Covenant as Earth is as well. But the Covenant they hate humankind. Like their like goal is to just obliterate them. I do like the fact that we did see the Covenant or the one of the elites
yep,
see Master Chief and call him Demon, because
yep,
that's what the Covenant calls him.
yep,
They call them the demons. And I do appreciate the fact that they got like the armor coloring. Like you see the blue armored elites, you see like that one red armor elite, which were harder to kill in the video games. They had cloaking,
yep,
they had their alien language, what,
yep.
which was,
We
we
heard
always
that.
joked about. Like I'm
Yep.
like, oh damn, okay, I gotta say that you included that. That's
Yeah.
that's cool in my book, but
There are nods to the fans here. I don't.
for sure,
I get that they're doing their own story, and
yeah,
they're also including those Easter eggs, which I'm cool with. Like,
yeah,
and to me, I think it's kind of an interesting story because like what so basically you have this rebellion, and you find out that like the UNSC is kind of at war with this rebellion ish, and then the Covenant show up,
yeah,
and I think the story they're trying to tell is that like you can bridge differences against a common foe,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I think that's pretty interesting. And you include two characters with conflicting motivations, Master Chief and, oh gosh, what's the girl's name?
Quan
Quan. Yeah.
Quan Ha, I
So
think.
Quan Ha. Yeah, that's right. Um, and so you've got her where she hates the UNSC. They killed her mom. You got Master Chief who has just been given a mission to kill her and
Yeah,
disobeys it. Um, and it's interesting because to me, the most important, or not important, but interesting part of the Halo canon is this idea of doing what needs to be done versus what's right.
right.
So, and the Spartans themselves are the manifestation of that, right? You kill a bunch of kids in hopes that you get, 10 that are super powered that can save humanity.
Yeah,
And so, like, that's a huge moral dilemma, right? Would you kill a bunch of kids to save humanity? Like, it's a horrible thing to do, right? And so they also touch on that with Keyes talking about executing the insurrectionists, is saying like
yep,
it has to be done. It's not even a choice for me. And I think that stuff is super interesting. And if they delve more
yeah,
into that, this show can be very powerful. And I think they
yeah,
kind of honed in on those themes and then built a story around those themes to try and make it more in the vein of what Halo represents than what was actually in the games. And I think that's interesting. It could be interesting. So far, I think that's the most interesting part. I saw a lot of
yeah,
people that were like, the first half of the episode was great. I hated the second half. And I was the exact opposite. Because, like, to me, mindless action is kind of boring. Like, I'd much rather see the story they're trying to tell. And don't get
yeah.
me wrong, like, when you see Master Chief like fly down from the sky and land, like that's badass. Like
It
I'm
was,
totally okay with seeing stuff like that.
yeah,
Um, but if this show was just like Halo porn, just watching Master Chief beat up on elites the whole time. It would be super boring. So I
it would
appreciate
get
that they're
old
trying
to
to
a
tell
certain
a little
extent.
story.
Yeah, like because honestly, the couple takeaways from this episode is we can see that you know he's he and the Spartans Silver team are familiar with fighting the Covenant, which
Yep.
means that they've been at this for some time now. There's the Covenant are calling them demons, which that has to incite the fact that there's previous conflict between the two.
Yep.
You don't just say that when you first see them, and
Right.
we even see the High Charity prophet Mercy, I think it was, who says uh, which we'll get into in a moment as well, with
Yep.
that whole
I
finagle
have a
thing.
theory.
Um, yeah, I do too, and I think, but again, like they know about Master Chief and the Spartans and whatnot, so
Yep.
I do like that there is more to it. If people just didn't pick up on that, then that's okay. But I think it almost looked like Master Chief was fighting the Covenant on like easy mode. Like if you're
Yeah.
playing the game, it's on easy because he's just like he's like punching them, like mailing him like once, and he's just like shooting with
Right.
the AR. Like I'm like, I wish I could do that on Legendary and not get just like one shot kill or something like that.
What
But
bugged me, so first off, I thought the action was a little bit corny. And
it was.
what can you do, right? Like, your CGI budget is not that high on a TV show, that it would be on a movie. All of
Right.
your enemies are CGI. Like, what are you gonna do? Kind of thing. Like, you can put
Yeah.
people in these elite costumes, but it's gonna look terrible. So it's like
Yeah.
you can't really avoid it. Really, the only thing you could do is just have less action.
Yeah.
But
Pick and
that's
choose your
not gonna
battles,
people
literally.
get yeah, people get pissed about that. But what I found interesting was, like, the guns that the insurrectionists were using were not working at all. Like, they used the turret and it didn't do anything, and then Chief picks up the turret and it works. So I was like,
Yeah.
"What? That
Yeah, it
doesn't
was
make any
weird.
sense."
Just mows down like 3 or 4 elites. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Did the bullets get more powerful because he's
what?
holding it?
Yeah. Powered him up.
Plot
Uh
bullets.
yeah. The Spart he didn't see it, but he put it in the Spartan bullets,
Yeah.
and then just mowed them all down. I mean, I referenced this in the beginning during the trailer when the first teaser trailer came out, but the other four, or sorry, the other three Spartans that are with him are actually picked from actual canon.
Okay.
So they aren't made up. They're actually from the canon lore, which again, I'm thinking you had to have
Yeah,
you
they
had to
did
have
their
known
research.
something. Yeah.
I
So
think it's good. They took the whole landscape of what Halo was and then created a story around it,
yeah.
rather than just taking the exact story of the games. And I think that that's fine with me.
Yeah,
As long
me
as they're
too.
not just like slapping Master Chief in a story that doesn't make any sense related to Halo. Like, and I don't think they're doing that. It seems like they're trying to loosely kind of follow the canon, but create their own story and plot and try and come up with something interesting. And I applaud that. Like, it's a risk, but we could have gotten super safe, follow the book or follow the games exactly. You know what's going to happen the whole time, but that's not really interesting, right? You'd rather have like some surprises in there that you don't know are going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I to the extent of following the story, word for word, some things could be predictable. I think in some cases though too, like the things that haven't been brought to life or that you could bring to life, but again, like you're saying, like alter a bit to add some, a different perspective on it, while still sort of, not being on the line, but somewhat,
Yeah.
parallel to that
Yeah.
line. That they could, I hope that's what they do
Yeah, I
throughout
hope
the
the can is like bumpers in
right.
bowling, right? You don't
Yeah,
go too
like
far outside of it,
yeah,
but you
like
can
here's the
wiggle.
lanes
Yeah.
you can go back and forth
Yeah,
from. So as long as you don't, bounce over in the other lane and hit the other pins down, then
right.
it should be a pretty safe story, I guess. But there's a lot to tell because again, these are hour-long episodes,
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting. I was expecting like a 30-minute episode. And so there's a bit of story to be told here. With the object that Chief finds on Madrigal. It's a forerunner technology, right? And which is a little bit of a deviation from how we learn about forerunner technology, because the Halo ring is forerunner
Right.
technology, and there's a bigger importance behind the rings, which we'll talk about like in another episode once we finally see them in the show.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know about this, but um, it's a forerunner piece of technology that just, has I don't know, sparked something in Master Chief,
Yep.
and obviously has a lot of power, as Forerunner technology often does.
Yep.
But I wonder if this piece of technology is going to uh, be the thing that leads them to the ring. Like, I wonder if this is
It could be.
the index that
Oh,
you find, or in the game, in the first game, that you have to recover,
that's
right?
actually a really good. That's a really good thought.
Because it looks like it's like a key that you would place in like the center console, or
Yep.
it's like the thing that 343 Guilty Spark wants you to
Yeah.
insert to turn on the ring,
Yep.
and then Cortana's like, Chief, that's a bad idea, don't do
Yep.
it. And then you don't do it, and then 343 just like how dare you, Reclaimer? Like,
Right.
so but yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
On just the Forerunner
The
object,
Forerunner object.
see, I didn't think much of it. I mean, it's obviously like a, the MacGuffin kind of
Yeah,
thing, right?
totally.
It's literally just like sparking the plot,
Yep.
quite literally.
Yeah.
uh, but I think that's a good idea that it could be the index, and like it would be cool if like the Covenant knew about the Halo, but they don't in the original, right?
Yeah, they're the only way, the way that the Covenant finds out about but the Halo Ring is because they track the Pillar of
Right,
Autumn.
right.
Like, so Covenant attacks Reach,
Yeah, yeah.
Cortana and
They
Chief and
space out and
Keys.
they case them.
Yeah, right. They've slipped space, to the ring,
Yep,
by coincidence, and then the Covenant had tracked them,
got it.
and then that's when they both like kind of crash land on the.
Yeah, so
Uh,
it'll be interesting, like, why are the Covenant searching for this artifact?
yeah, like
We
all of a
don't know yet.
sudden.
But yeah, let's talk about, I mean, the last, kind of elephant in the room, that everybody has talked about since the trailer is, who is this human with the Covenant? Why is she with
Yeah.
the Covenant? And I'm not gonna give any judgment on that story choice until we see the rest of the story. Because I understand the
That's
fact that,
fair.
yes, the Covenant hate humanity. There is no way they would raise a human. However, I would hope there would be some sort of a good reason, storytelling wise, that they would introduce this. And if it ends up being a good idea, I'm totally open to it. And so my kind of theory on this is that maybe she was actually training to be a Spartan. And they kind of like recognized that she'd gone through some of the training, and, in one of their prior fights, kidnapped her and raised her as their own, something like that. I don't really know. But I thought it was interesting that there was a little moment in there where I guess she's supposed to be a primary antagonist of this show, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, and part of it could have been budget too, where it's like, we can't have our primary antagonist be a CGI monster because we can't afford that.
Yeah.
So let's come up with a
Just
better
make her a
idea.
human, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. Uh, but it was interesting that like she shows like a little glimpse of, maybe she's not happy with her situation. Like she's reading that book, and the prophet is saying, you're only reading that book for recon, but it seems like she's kind of
There's
empathizing with humanity a little bit.
yeah, like there seems to be this bit of a like an attachment. Like she's a little reluctant to leave it behind when
Yeah.
she's like, I want to go speak with this, this elite, this Kaidan warrior, right? And that's when Mercer's like, why don't you leave that book behind? And she's like, oh, I forget what the title of the book was on it as well.
Uh,
I wondered if the book title has something to do with her
I'll have
thought
to go
process.
like frame by frame it or something.
Yeah. But yeah, and he's like, I hope that you would read it to me one day so that I could understand our enemy as well. And I kind of wondered if she, yeah, I think that's a possible scenario where she could have been abandoned by the Spartan program,
Oh,
uh,
yeah. Yeah.
or if, and again, like I think because of the covenant that is again sort of searching for this searching for this forerunner technology that they found on Madrigal, right? Um, I wonder, and it maybe leads me to believe or think that the Covenant is also going to other planets, or they have gone to other planets to do the same thing,
Yep.
and maybe that's something that initially led them there. But then they also realized, hey, there's like an outpost of humans, we should eradicate them as well, while we're trying to mine this, piece of technology. And maybe they were on another planet that they kind of did the same thing, but that's where they picked up this our
Yeah. Could
antagonist,
be.
and then like she had some sort of reaction to the technology that they might have previously gotten from another planet. So there's
Yeah.
still some mystery around it, but yeah, I think that's fair. Like you said, like to not super judge it right off the bat. I mean, I am curious because it really goes against what was, you know, uh, just the canon between the covenant and
Yeah.
mankind. So,
Yep. And it
it'll be
definitely does. As long as it's interesting, I don't really care.
yeah. Like I think, and again, like we knew that there's going to be a different story here, and I think if they can tell a different story, just 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 tell it well enough
Mhm.
that's like believable. Like it's not corny or it's not like super plot armor driven. That at least they could be like, hey, look, we touched again. We stayed in the lanes. We told a little bit of a different story, and it still works in the end.
Still
Like
Halo. Yeah.
right, like I mean, there's a lot that I wonder what they'll do. Here in this first season, like I don't know where Chief went in the Pelican, because I'm like he has to come back. I think to reach at some point, maybe, or maybe not. I don't know, but like he has to get Cortana at some point. So the two of them have to get there. The one thing I will say is what the last maybe like the last point, because Keyes is already captain,
Mhm.
and I know just from like the book, like it get just more backstory behind another character that would be cool to see is how he became captain because of his of the space battles that he won. Like I know that he took on like three Covenant cruisers by himself in one ship. So again, I think just adding to another like a character that respected Chief would be nice to see. Um, but I don't know. Like it's going to be interesting. I think the relationship between Halsey and Chief has always been very ambiguous from like the
Yep.
books and the games, which seems to be presented in this first episode.
Yep.
But yeah, the biggest parts for me was when we actually see Cortana.
Yeah.
But
Well, I mean, we know that's coming.
yep.
I forget, did the trailer show a Halo ring at all? I don't know if it did or not,
I don't
but
believe so from some of the images that I have from the actual uh from the trailer. I don't think we see it. Which
I
again
mean,
I'm okay
probably
with.
just a surprise for later. And
Yeah.
I'm okay if we don't see it, honestly, till like season 2. Or I mean, I think it'll be the finale is they reach the Halo ring.
I think
Maybe like halfway, maybe. I
I
don't
think
know.
a majority of what we saw from the trailer does come from probably. I mean, most of it came from the first episode. I think there are a
Yeah,
couple of screenshots that um, that I have that looks like they come from the second episode. Like there's one where we see the three prophets, this antagonist. I can't remember
yeah,
her name, but then the one elite that escaped, and the who went invisible and then went
yeah,
and the ghost or the banshee and then left. Um, there's another scene from the trailer though that is about the antagonist where she like walks into a room,
yeah. I
right,
remember that.
and like blasts like I don't know, I'm guessing there it's like the UNSC, but like
Yeah,
it's like she does like this like force push and they all just
yeah,
like get like thrown back. So she's got some sort of, I don't know, like weird power about her, which I'm really curious about. And um yeah, I think that's going to be the interesting part, and I think that's obviously where like their original story comes in too.
yeah,
But yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm really curious about that part. But
yeah. I would say I'm
um,
intrigued. I mean, overall, like if I had to rate it, I'd probably give this about a 6 out of 10.
yeah, that's where
Um,
I
the,
was.
the production value is good in some areas and pretty cheesy and terrible in some areas, and that kind of brings it down. But I'm at least intrigued by the story that they're trying to tell, and that's more than I thought I would get. Like
I
I
agree.
thought it was going to be just like a low budget action fest, and that's kind of what the first half of this episode was. But it seems like they're trying to do their own kind of thing, and it might work, it might not, but I'm at least interested. I'm along for the ride.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think like the 6 out of 10 was right where I was standing, especially just after watching it a second time. I'm kind of curious to see what the budget was. I
Yeah, I
haven't
am too. I don't
checked,
think they've said anything about it.
but yeah, maybe they will after the first season or
Mhm.
maybe even second season. Which, for those of you that don't know, there is a second season already,
Yep.
so there's no wondering about that or not.
To
I
me,
guess.
that shows some confidence in it, even though like the reviews are, I think they're 58%, so it's not awful.
Yeah, and
But
I think for Paramount, they're probably just wondering, like, okay, well, it's the first episode. We'll see you after the first season.
yeah,
Going into the second season, we'll see what people are saying.
yeah,
Because who knows if we'll get anything more than that. But um, you know, I think at some point they probably won't try to supersede the games story wise because
yeah,
that story is you know still being told.
yeah,
But they could make it a lot more. They could flesh out the seasons more if they really wanted to go that route. But yeah, I agree. It's a few things that were a little cheesy, but expected at the same time. I think
yeah.
so. Yeah, I
We'll
think about.
see.
We'll see. Yeah, I think they come out on Thursdays,
Yep.
every Thursday. So, um, yeah,
Assuming it doesn't like go off the deep end terrible, we'll keep reviewing them. So
yeah, yeah. So stay tuned for all of our future reviews on them, and hopefully they get better. I think if it can go up from the 6 out of 10 range, which seems to be like the majority consensus so far, both from critics and audience, it'll be enjoyable to watch. Um, I don't think it can get well. I, I I was gonna say I don't think it can get any worse, but I think it could, depending on what
it
they
could.
do.
It could very much get worse.
But it could also get better.
Yeah,
So
I hope it does.
they could go to the moon, or it could go off the deep end. So
Yeah.
we'll
We'll
see.
see what
But
happens.
yeah,
They haven't blown their shot yet, and that's more than I could have hoped for. So
same here, same here. So yeah, that I think that'll about do it for us. So let us know what you thought. If you enjoyed the episode, if you're about where the both of us are in terms of the overall aspect of this first episode here, or look, if you didn't like it, I understand. But just comment below, and we'll have a little bit of a conversation. And until then, you can catch us on the next Halo TV series, episode 2. Peace out.